Ready? Okay, we're ready. All right, we're gonna fire it up, and as we go, if more people funnel in, so be it. Thanks, as always, for joining me, so I don't have to talk to myself here, and anybody joining us online. This is part 2 of the Chiropractic Philosophy course, and tonight we're going to talk about innate intelligence. Last week we talked about universal intelligence, and I think one of the things that I took away from last week, like I always learn as much as anybody, is when you're trying to explain innate or universal intelligence to someone, it's tough to grasp what you're talking about when you use the word intelligence. When I say intelligence, automatically everybody thinks we're talking about a being and or like smarts, right? But we're talking about a program. So for tonight's purposes, every time we say intelligence, we're talking about a program. We're talking about those metaphysical specifications like we talked about last week, okay? So the chiropractic principles, remember there are 33 principles, and principle number 20 talks about innate intelligence. All the principles previous to that talk about universal principles and universal intelligence and universal forces. So one of the things that I wanted to hit on before I even start going into innate intelligence or program is those universal forces. So the forces, remember, when we talked about the field and all that information being coded into that field, then a force results from that. The purpose of that intelligence, that program, is to create forces. So the forces of universal intelligence are always destructive in nature, okay? Like gravity, like friction, like electricity, like all those things break down matter, okay? So the balance, I guess you would say, is between the universal forces and innate forces. Innate forces are the opposite. They actually build things up, okay? So when we look at the difference between a living body, our body, let's say, and your car, there's a lot of moving parts on a car, and it's very complex machine, but the body always builds up. We call it regeneration. Like every generation of cells, the old ones will die off, new ones come in to take their place, okay? In a car, it's always just from the moment you drive it off the lot or it's out of the factory, it starts breaking down immediately. Those universal forces are just breaking it down, okay? So when we're talking about these innate principles, we're talking about it's a different program. It's going to fall under the guise of universal intelligence because it's in the universe, okay? But it's different because this program is building things up, all right? So principle number 20, innate intelligence, or that innate inborn program, a living thing has an inborn intelligence or program within its body called innate intelligence. Again, if you think program, an inborn program that runs your body, knows how to adapt and take materials and forces and use them for constructive purposes in your body, okay? So evidence of life. The signs of life are evidence of the intelligence or the program of life. So the signs of life, when we're talking, 4, 5. Okay, when we're talking, biology 101, these are the signs of life. Assimilation, what is assimilation? It's taking something and using it to produce something else in your body, okay? We take food and we make cells in our body. Excretion, don't have to go into that one. Adaptability. Now, that one's important because there are things that we'll run into that maybe exhibit some of these other signs of life, but they don't exhibit adaptability, all right? Or maybe some, like a virus, might exhibit some of these things to a degree, but reproduction, they don't reproduce by themselves. They'll use, it's a program, basically, a DNA or an RNA program that your body, your cells actually take up and then use that DNA or RNA to replicate that virus. So it's an optical illusion to say that a virus reproduces, because it doesn't. Okay, so when we're talking about a living thing, there are those things like a virus where I would argue that maybe we need an expansion kit to go along with the chiropractic philosophy, because those things haven't really been talked about in depth. Okay, there's definitely an intelligence there. There's definitely a program that we can see, but it wouldn't qualify as innate intelligence, because all of these things have to be met in order for it to qualify as a living thing with an innate intelligence. All right. So the context, character, and mission of innate intelligence. Context, number 20. Innate intelligence, a living thing has an inborn intelligence within its body called innate intelligence. Okay. It's that program that runs the body of a living thing. Okay. Character. So number 25 and number 26, innate forces. So the forces that are coded for by that innate program are constructive. Like we said, it builds things up. And then the mission of that program, the reason that it's written, is to maintain the material of the body of a living thing in active organization. So we call active organization. Okay, meaning, yeah, old cells are going to be dying, but new cells are going to be coming in to take their place, things like that. If we didn't have that program to maintain us in active organization, your body would just be a puddle on the floor. Okay, so something has to code for that coordination of all these, 3 trillion cells in your body, or however many cells are in an adult body now. So that's I wanted to go over those things before I kind of jump into what some of the scientists now are saying about chiropractic philosophy. And this is Bruce Lipton. I don't know if you guys have heard of Bruce Lipton, but a few years back, Bruce Lipton kind of got into, he's a geneticist, and he got into the chiropractic world because he read a little bit about the philosophy and thought, oh, this makes sense. I like this. And he started applying the philosophy to what he was doing in the lab with genetics. And he didn't understand the philosophy totally, but he could use the lingo. Okay. So I kind of made fun of him for a little bit, but we got to be able to look at somebody who's talking the talk and say, okay, this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense, because I think they'll use like a homeopathy or a philosophy like that, and then they'll kind of try and mix it with science or something, and then call it chiropractic philosophy by using our terms, and it's not the same. Okay, so what he said was that the dynamic interaction, he was talking about innate intelligence. He said a dynamic interaction between environmental signals and growth protection genes evolved an innate intelligence, meaning in his brain, the first cell, if you want to look at like the evolutionary theory, didn't have an innate intelligence. Okay, by definition, if it was a living cell, it had an innate intelligence. It had to have that program. Okay, so we understand that he's already going, off the reservation. Okay, and he said that enabled cells to read environmental signals and invoke appropriate survival mechanisms. Again, you can't even have adaptation, which is what he's talking about, without that program, without an innate intelligence. Okay, he said, according to the chiropractic philosophy, innate intelligence represents the source of life. The innate is a form of environmentally derived vital energy. So, knowing what we know about chiropractic philosophy, innate intelligence, innate forces, we should be able to read through this and kind of pick it apart, because what he's saying there is that innate intelligence is an environmentally derived vital energy. Well, is it an energy? Is it a force? Energy and force are the same thing. It's not. It's a program, right? It kind of precludes that force, okay? It's the code for the force. But what he's talking about here, an environmentally derived force or vital energy, So what does innate intelligence do? It adapts universal forces for use in the body. There are universal forces, remember, are destructive, but the innate forces are constructive. And the innate force that we always talk about is where did I put it? I didn't put it on there. Somewhere in here we'll go into this, but the mental impulse, okay, is an innate force that the body, that the program innate puts forth in the body. It runs over the nervous system. Okay, the mental impulse is actually what he's talking about here, because what innate intelligence does, it adapts. It codes for adaptation. So those forces are coming in from universal forces, and your body, the innate intelligence, the code in your body, that program takes those forces and then uses them for constructive purposes in your body. So it's environmentally derived, meaning innate takes it from universal forces, and vital force, meaning it's using it for life-giving purposes in your body, okay? So what he's talking about there, we have the equivalent in chiropractic philosophy. It's called the mental impulse. But he's thinking, no, this is innate intelligence. No, intelligence, innate intelligence, he falls into that trap of thinking it's like a being or something, right? Innate intelligence, it's that program, okay? It codes for force. So when he's talking about a vital energy, that life-giving force, energy, that's the mental impulse, okay? Another word in our lexicon that really only exists in chiropractic is that mental impulse. And it's not the same as an action potential. The mental impulse actually goes first. They've been able to measure it over the nervous system before the action potential actually follows, okay? So when a nerve fires electricity down that nerve, that's called an action potential. That electrical signal can be measured, but there's actually a psionic wave is what it's called, that actually precludes that action potential. That's actually the mental impulse that we're looking at, okay? So does innate, see, he's falling into this trap, and a lot of chiropractors fall into this trap, thinking that innate intelligence is intelligent, okay? It has a choice, it has a will, it exercises volition. So it'll choose this over this. And a lot of times in the early writings, BJ or DD would say, innate chooses this over this. It doesn't really choose. Like it's a program, like I said, a very complex program written by an infinitely intelligent source, we call it in chiropractic. But God wrote that program. It doesn't choose, it just obeys. It does what it was designed to do. Does that make sense? That's the law of identity. In philosophy says, okay, that you can't violate the law of identity. It is what it is, basically. Okay, so innate intelligence doesn't choose, rationalizing that this is better or this is worse. It's bound by the law of identity. So being intelligence or being a program, it must acquire and apply forces and matter towards the mission of maintaining that material body in active organization. To do otherwise would make it something other than innate intelligence, okay? So what he's talking about, that's not innate intelligence, that's a mental impulse. And a lot of times when they try to mix like a philosophy of life, but a vital philosophy with science and then call it chiropractic, they're going to mess up those terms, and they're going to talk about vital force or vital energy as innate intelligence. They're not the same thing. As far as I know, we're the only healthcare profession that really has that category, that innate intelligence, that program in our philosophy. Every other philosophy, healing philosophy, talks about from force on down to matter and how that force interacts with matter, but they don't talk about this side of the equation, which is that program, that innate intelligence. We're the only ones that really even talk about that. So remember, source in chiropractic, that's God, okay? So that's Article 41 out of the chiropractic textbook says the power that supplies the universe with intelligence, force, and matter, everything. They used to think it was another word for universal intelligence because they used to think the universe was infinite, okay? But we know that it's not. The concern here, though, is they call source and subsource. Universal intelligence, they kind of can mix you up by saying it's the source of force, okay? When you're talking about innate intelligence, that program in your body, it adapts universal forces. So our body can take forces like a plant does. It's a living thing. We take, sun's radiation, we make vitamin D. A plant takes the sun's radiation and makes sugars, and photosynthesis use that process to make food and oxygen and stuff like that. So I wanted to come up with a template to kind of help people understand what we're talking about isn't a life form. It's not a being. It's not conscious. It's basically a program. And the innate intelligence, I came up with this template. So if you fill in the blanks here, you should be able to use this for any intelligence, like an artificial intelligence would be the programmed ability of a machine or, whatever, to acquire and apply information towards an end goal, right? That's what a computer does. That's what a calculator does. So innate intelligence would be the inborn ability of a living thing to apply universal forces and matter toward the maintenance of its material body in active organization. So that template can be used for pretty much any version of intelligence or program, all right? And again, we have the benefit of having AI and these programs, software programs, that we kind of understand a little bit better what intelligence or what a program is, whereas program didn't even exist, right, as a word at that time. So innate intelligence was the words that they chose, and it just really screws people up if they don't know what we're talking about. So questions, contemplations: is innate intelligence and evolved intelligence? Well, no, because in order for something to be living and to be able to adapt and do all the signs of life, it has, by definition, that program, that innate intelligence. Did the first cell on Earth have an innate intelligence? If you want to look at their evolutionary theory, they can't even have that without an innate intelligence, okay? So what is the chiropractic equivalent of that environmentally derived vital force? We talked about that. That's the mental impulse. That's the innate force, okay? And how about I already said it. Never mind. So you can't have organic life without an innate intelligence. It's a living thing has an inborn intelligence within called innate intelligence. So many times it's referred to as subsource because it adapts those forces and uses them for purposes in the body, and they'll call it subsource. So in chiropractic philosophy, when you're reading through and you read source with a small s, they're talking about universal intelligence being the source of forces for our body, okay, or material for our body. And then subsource, they'll talk about innate intelligence as the subsource, the usually the little s, okay. Source with the big S, they reserve for the source, okay. And again, we call it God. We say God is the source, but in chiropractic philosophy, because it's a philosophy of things natural, they don't talk about the supernatural. They just simply say there is a source, okay. So is there such a thing as an innate intelligence without a living thing? I don't think there is, okay. There's the program, but I don't think that program would be expressed without living matter, right? That's where my brain goes. Like, is there a field out there maybe waiting for that form, those M fields that will surround like a certain form? Does that exist without the form? Does the field exist? Maybe it does, but we would never be able to know that without that that matter, that organic matter. So, what the heck is innate intelligence? We already talked about that. Localized, okay. Okay, okay, come on. So I did a little grammatical analysis here. Innate, when we talk about innate intelligence, is an adjective. Okay, it describes intelligence. It gives context. Intelligence, remember, is a noun. Okay, so it's not describing something as intelligent. Intelligence is the noun there. It's not an adjective. They're not describing something as intelligent. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the template here. So what I did was I just went through and I used artificial intelligence, that manufactured ability of a machine to apply information toward a given objective. That's what a calculator does, right? So innate intelligence, same thing. We got to be able to use a template, I think, to explain it to people, lay people that can understand then chiropractic philosophy a little bit better, and it doesn't sound like mumbo jumbo. So the only function then of innate intelligence is intellectual adaptation. It's getting information. It's that program gets information, okay, and it sends all that information if then through that algorithm, and then spits out the adaptation at the end, and it's still in the realm of intellectual. It's not in the physical realm, okay. So the purpose is of innate intelligence is that intellectual adaptation, that adaptation in the program, in that realm of intelligence, okay. But then it gets fed through that field, coded for a force, and then expressed in matter, okay. So we're going to see it in the matter, but the adaptation actually happens in the metaphysical, that fifth dimension, we say, of the code of the innate intelligence. It runs through that algorithm in the field and then gets coded as a force and expressed in matter, okay. So it doesn't have a choice. It simply goes through the program and spits out the adaptation. You don't need an infinite program if you have an infinitely intelligent programmer who could potentially see every possible scenario, okay. So the choice here that a lot of people say, innate chooses this over this, when they try to reason out, like, what about autoimmune diseases or something like that. Well, we're going to talk about interference with innate forces, okay? But you can't really interfere with the program. You would have to be God. That program's already written. But the transmission of that code into force and into matter, there can be interference there, okay? So we always look there for a problem in the body. When there's an expression issue that that body isn't expressing that intelligence the way it's supposed to, we look at the transmission. We don't say, okay, God wrote a bad code. We look at the transmission there, and we look at the breakdown in that communication system. In our body, it happens to be the nervous system, okay? So all those forces actually get sent over the nervous system, and then information gets sent back. And there are cycles that in chiropractic philosophy we study, from universal intelligence, then the flow all the way down to innate intelligence, then the flow of information all the way down to a tissue cell, okay, and then the flow back up that all the way up to universal intelligence again, okay. So again, I think chiropractic philosophy is the only naturalistic philosophy that has that intelligence, that code, or that program. Every other healing philosophy that I know of looks at the force, the vital energy or the force, and matter. And that's all they look at. Okay. Just this side of the equation. So we're the only ones that are even trying to teach people that, okay, there is a code here. There is a program. So it doesn't choose, it just, that's what it's programmed. It's not a living thing. It's not conscious. It's not subjective. we're 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 talking about a program that is coded into a field that is associated with a form, okay, and that in that field gets expressed through forces. The innate forces in the body then are expressed over the nervous system and manifest in the physical cells. All right. So subluxation, we're probably going to have to go back and talk about subluxation in terms of chiropractic philosophy, because that, like I said, is where the breakdown occurs. If a body isn't expressing that program or that code at 100%, it's not the code's fault. It's usually there's a breakdown in that communication between the force and the expression of that force in matter. Okay. And that's where a subluxation comes in. So next week, we're going into subluxation, probably a little bit more detail than it's a bone out of place putting pressure on a nerve. Okay. We're actually going to go over some principles, but next week is the subluxation, and then we'll probably have to go back and do something on fields and helping everybody understand where everything is kind of coded into there. But for tonight, we're all finished. Innate intelligence expressed over the nervous system, and next week we'll talk a little bit about subluxation, and which is that interference with the expression. Okay.